Welcome to Season 3 of the Casual Camping Podcast, your home for the best camping discussion both in and out of the field. Here are your hosts, Tim and Ade.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Casual Camping Podcast. I'm Ade.
And I'm Tim. Good evening, everybody. Good morning, good night, whatever time it is that you might be listening.
It sounded like the Eurovision then, Tim.
You got to love a bit of Eurovision. You're there again with your up-to-date music references.
Hey, they're still relevant.
Although Eurovision's still on. It is still on. It's in all its loveliness. This week, listeners, we've been joined by our first guest of season 3, and it's a special guest who's I personally, certainly compared to us, you could definitely call him an expert in his field, and I'm not going to big him up any more than that because I'll just end up falling over myself. But we've been joined by Huw Thomas.
Yeah, hello guys.
Hi, Huw. Would it be fair to say that you're quite adventurous?
I like to be, yeah. Not as much as I'd like to, but I do like to go camping in really remote places.
Well, it's my first contact with you, I think, was when you just joined the group, and you were like, "I don't know why I'm here. Somebody's recommended me," and I was like, "This is an existential question, isn't it?" But please tell me about yourself. And you've been putting up pictures, some amazing pictures underneath glaciers, and I asked about Greenland and stuff. So yeah, welcome to the group generally, but the podcast in itself. Love to hear your story.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, guys. Well, I mean, I was happy to join a group that's enthusiastic about camping. So, and what I do, I suppose it's about as wild as camping gets. So in a nutshell, I suppose I've fallen in love with the region of West Greenland. And I've been out there 13 times so far since 2006. Wow. And I normally go for a minimum of 3 weeks, sometimes up to 5 weeks. And about maybe 4 of those days I spend in town, if you like. The rest of the time is really out in my tent, out in the wilderness. I also combine my passion and pleasure for just going out there to camp in that wilderness with a bit of ecological research, if you like, wildlife research, helping a friend of mine who started a study out there of wild geese many years ago in the 70s. And when they started off, they had the RAF drop all their supplies and everything out there, and they started this study. There's quite a bit to talk about here, so I don't know how, I'll try and condense it. So I managed to combine now my personal pleasure for hiking and camping out there, along with supporting that scientific work. And I also, sometimes I'm there on my own, and sometimes I'm with a team of people if we are catching wild geese to ring them, or in the last 2022 and 2023, I was doing something far more interesting there. But I always like to tell people I literally go on wild goose chases. I actually really do. Including even running up a hillside trying to get hold of the goose if they're escaping.
That's amazing. Yeah. You say 1970s and wild geese to me, and I think of the movie with Richard Burton and Hardy Kruger and Roger Moore in them, which is the other end of the stream, based in Africa. How
up-to-date reference there.
Up-to-date movie reference, as always.
Quality movie reference, though.
It is a good movie. So you're about as far away from casual camping as you're going to get, and although I love the idea of going to the Arctic and going to Greenland, part of it scares the bejesus out of me. How did it start for you? So how did you actually, did somebody invite you, or did you just decide, I'm just going to get on a plane and give that a go?
No, well, it started in Scotland. I was on the West Highland Way, And I was walking there, and I met a Danish couple who I kept meeting them because we were leapfrogging each other on the trail. And they happened to mention at one of our conversations that the previous year they'd done this hike in West Greenland that they'd found quite challenging, and it was called the Arctic Circle Trail. That was 2005. So there wasn't really much information available about it. There were no internet blogs, there were no websites, etc. So I did as much research as I could, which was a bit of a struggle at the time. And I found out where this trail was in West Greenland. And so I decided that after the West Highland Way, I wanted to up the game a bit. So I decided I was going to do this Arctic Circle Trail, which is roughly about 100 miles in West Greenland between the coast and, well, it kind of ends in a town called Gongertlusvak, which is about 14 miles from the edge of the ice sheet, the western edge of the ice sheet. So that's the trail. It runs east-west, basically, between... There's only 2 towns in the region. There's Sisimiut on the coast, which is about 5,000 people or so. It's usually West Greenland's northernmost ice-free harbour in winter. And then Gongertlusvak inland, 100 miles or so inland, is just a tiny place of about 500 people, an ex-American airbase. Not much there apart from some tourist facilities and the airport. And that's another big political story recently, as it were. So I found out where the trail was. Nowadays, there's a website for it developed by a friend of mine called Lisa, who works out there. There's a Facebook page dedicated to the trail, in which I'm one of the admins. So there's a lot more information these days available for people to do this trail. It's still remote, though. Once you start, in summer at least, you either finish it or you turn back, because there's no getting off halfway. There's no trains or bus stations or whatever. So you're into the wilderness. There are some huts along the route that are free to use, but you also need to be prepared to camp if the huts are full. But basically, you need to be self-sufficient with all your food and everything for about 8 days. And you probably need to add a couple of days on top of that, just in case of bad weather, or you decide to hang around somewhere that you fancy. So there is that trail that normally takes most hikers 8 days or so. It's in beautiful wilderness, so it's absolutely leave no trace, although people do unfortunately leave garbage and empty gas canisters and whatever, which is so I did the trail. I did it on my own in 2007 because it was a bit of a disaster in 2006, because I agreed to take a friend of mine against my better judgment, and he really wasn't up to it, so we had to turn back. So I went back in 2007, did it myself, and then from there things really expanded. Originally I thought I was going to do this one trail and tick it off, like most people do, the trails tick. But I just found something special about being in that Arctic wilderness that really got under my skin. So nowadays, I only use 3 days of the trail initially, and then I come off the trail and follow a route I plotted for myself, which I first did in 2012, which takes me off the beaten track, away from all the other hikers, into complete isolation, where I don't see a human at all. And it's just me in the vast silence with the wildlife. And I absolutely love that solitude and isolation out there. And the quality of it is much better for me than just being on a mountaintop somewhere in Snowdonia. I can't see anybody, because I know that for hundreds of miles around me out there is nothing, just pure wilderness. And to the east, obviously, 500 or 600 miles of just solid ice sheet. So the sense of isolation in that vast silence is really fascinating.
Wow. And going from Scotland, Huw, to Greenland, what were the changes that you needed to make? What kind of kit changes? Was there a lot of training that you needed to do to do one then the other?
I didn't do any specific training for it. I grew up in Snowdonia, so I've been going to the mountains since I was a kid, as it were. But it was upscaling in terms of, there's going to be no stopping somewhere for a beer and a pint and a pie or whatever, or restocking, etc. So the weight of your pack is you're carrying everything you need for at least 8 to 10 days, as I said. So you need to be wise in your choices of food, etc. And obviously, however many luxuries you're going to carry are going to add weight to your pack. And I listened to that other podcast that you sent me the link for, and I resonated with quite a few of the things that I can't remember.
Andrew Tyrrell, yeah.
That's right, yeah. There were a few things he said that really resonated with me, and I thought, I find a kindred spirit in some of these people. Like he talked about, he didn't worry about the weight of his pack, and he almost found it some sort of reward to do it with a heavy pack. Yeah. Bizarrely, in a perverse way, I find the same thing. When I get to the end of the hike, I feel somehow even more fulfilled and rewarded as a personal endurance thing if my pack was heavy than if I was doing it with a 15 or 20 kilos, which would be just too easy, too much lightweight. So, but no, I didn't do any specific training. I just knew I had to upscale the game and be completely self-sufficient. If something happens out there, because back in 2007, there weren't half as many people doing the trail as there are these days. It's now been popularized online, so a lot more people are going. Not all of them up to it, and not all of them with the right kind of ethics, unfortunately. But that's the double-edged nature of the internet publicizing something.
Sadly, yes, and not everyone has the same ethos, do they? Sadly, it's and like you say, it should be leave no trace everywhere. We're massive advocates for that, but wherever you go now in the world, there is rubbish, there's trash everywhere. Sadly, sadly,
it's really unfortunate.
Yeah. So why, you kind of touched on there about wanting that extreme isolation, and I love a good bit of solo camping, but I kind of joked to Ade before we came on, I do like to be within an hour's walk of a pub. If I need to. So what are you chasing in that ultimate isolation? Because that's like extreme isolation. You are miles and miles from another living human being. What's in it in that's what you get your fix from?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I've often had conversations with people, and I think Andrew touched on it as well, about the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is not a great state of mind or to be in, obviously, but solitude, if you really experience it, I find it, I don't know, it's hard to put your finger on why it's so rewarding to just be alone in nature. For me, I was in a very busy job, and going out there was the moments, those are the moments when I felt absolutely disconnected from the noise and all the chatter of my daily life, the busy human world, traffic, TV, internet, everything, to completely switch off and just be immersed in this massive sort of silence. It's a weird way to describe silence, but the whole place is silent apart from wildlife. And the occasional Greenland flight overhead. I just find that being immersed in that makes me feel the closest I've ever felt to being at peace with the world and nature, and feeling like a human being passing through the world without doing any damage, leaving no trace, as it were. So just having the privilege of walking through pristine nature that's as it has been for probably thousands of years. It's unmanaged out there. It's not fertilized, it's not cultivated, it's not polluted, it's not, it's just pristine nature just doing what it does. And I do feel it's such a privilege to spend time in there. And by now, after all the time I've been out there, I can vividly, feel the texture of the vegetation under my boots and everything, and the smell of the place. I can really do it because I've spent so much time just out there on my own. And every encounter with wildlife out there really enriches that experience. And there's a lot more than people think. I mean, the landscape looks empty at first glance, but there are lots of bird species. There are Arctic foxes. There are muskox and caribou as the two big things, and occasionally the polar bear in the region. So that has become a bit more of a concern.
I'm so glad that you said polar bear. I said to Ed, if he doesn't say polar bear, I'm absolutely asking him at the end, have you wrestled a polar bear?
I've not encountered one out there, but they are turning up. It seems to be a bit more frequently. There is evidence that they are crossing the ice sheet occasionally. I'm no doubt it's all driven by climate change, etc. And they are turning up in the region. There have been people evacuated because of risk of bear nearby, etc. So when I did it in winter, it was 5 months after the last of several bear sightings had happened. So I did the ACT in winter on my 10th visit to celebrate my 10th visit. I thought I'd do the same trail I'd done in summer and do it in winter, because most of the time now I'm not even on the trail. So I did in winter, and I did carry a weapon that time, just in case. I was advised by one of my local friends on there who was an outdoor guide, who said, at the moment, the locals aren't leaving town without a weapon. So if you have one, I'd bring it, she said. So I did carry one, but luckily it wasn't needed.
Yeah. Serious stuff then. It's not for the faint-hearted. You've really got to know what you're doing to go out into this place.
Well, I mean, they don't want to amplify the bear risk to the point that, everybody wants to be carrying weapons and stuff out there. Really don't. You get all manner of people coming out there. So there is a risk, but it's very, very low. So most people walking the trail are going to be fine, because the flight path between Congratulus and Sissimit is almost over the trail a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I reckon, the daily traffic in flights, passengers, Greenlanders, and pilots, if they spot a bear in the landscape, no doubt they would raise the alert, etc. Because alerts do pop up occasionally on the website that a bear's been sighted here or there or whatever, or hikers have seen one, and then it's kind of monitored. So there hasn't been any attacks out there, but bears have been in the region. In fact, I sighted my team one year at the eastern end, sorry, of a lake, and a few years before there was a bear sighted at the western end of the same lake. So we are occupying the same sort of area, but the bear is a rare presence. And I've been out there on my own for weeks and wandered all over the region that I'm going there. I've not seen them. So it's a very low risk, but it wouldn't be true to say they don't ever turn up there.
Yeah. You've not had to wrestle one there.
No.
That's good. That's good.
In regards to what's the weather difference in regards to, because I'm thinking, we're in the UK. It's been a reasonably hot spring day in Warwickshire, where I am. What's the difference between sort of going in the summer and to winter when you go?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's a misconception a lot of people have. They think that I'm going out there, I'm going to be on ice all the time. But in the summer, the West Coast, there is a strip about 100 and maybe 30 miles or so wide that thaws out generally. Although you can find large patches of snow even in July, but it generally thaws out. And so it's sort of clear of snow and ice, as it were. But even in July, the temperature can go up into the mid-20s during the day, say. And you can be really hot. I've had windless, sunny blue sky, really hot days out there, and with a heavy pack, just the slightest slope has got you sweating like mad.
I bet.
But in the same day, in the evening, it can be 1 degrees, or I have even known it to go just below zero, and a sheen of ice form on the lake. So, you've got a large daily temperature which you need to account for. In fact, where I camp, the last couple of times I've been out there prior to last year, I was doing some science work for a European project. I had to take a team out there, planned to take 10 and 11 people out for a whole month of camping, which is a hell of a lot of planning, as you can imagine. But where we camp, it's nice and warm, but as soon as the sun goes behind the mountain and the shadow reaches camp, you can really feel the temperature drop by about 4 degrees, and you can really feel it. In winter, to finish answering your question, sorry, when I was out there, the coldest night I pitched my tent was minus 32. And the week before, though, it had gone below minus 40. And in fact, I was crossing a large lake. I was on the surface of the lake, obviously, because it's frozen in winter. It's a 14-mile lake on the ice in the middle of the lake, approaching a little hut called Katifik. And as I got closer, I could see there was a pulka outside with skis neatly wrapped on top of it, etc. And I thought, oh, somebody's here. I'm going to meet somebody on the trail today. When I got to the hut, there was nobody there. The afternoon wore on. There was nobody around. And it was minus 30 at the time. Nobody around, no sign of anybody. So it wasn't until I finally got to town a day or so later, I saw a friend of mine who's a police officer out there. And I said to him, Patrick, do you know that there's a pulka at Katifik and there's nobody around? And he said, oh, yeah, we know. It's a Frenchman who was rescued with frostbite. We've sent him home and we'll go and get his pulka in a couple of days and send that on to France. So it was one of 3 frostbite rescues that year.
Gosh.
So for the winter stuff, you really do need to know what you're doing.
Yeah. So even in the summer, though, that, like you say, that massive change in temperature between a July day and a July night, that really must make you think about the equipment that you've got to take.
Yeah, I tell my people, to bring a down jacket even for July in the summer, because in camp in the evening it gets pretty chilly and it can get quite cold. So you've got gloves and down jacket and stuff even in the middle of summer out there. And during the day, I normally hike in a base layer and a thin microfleece, and that's usually fine for me on the move. You've got mosquitoes around if you're unpleasant, obviously, if you react badly to them, but I'm so used to them, I'm fine. So you do have kit for staying warm in the evening and being expect to be fairly warm in the day. Although, again, in July, in the middle of the day, one year, we had a blizzard. We had snow. It was gone by the evening. It had all melted away. So the temperature's a bit wild. But in recent years, though, it's become much more volatile. So I took 10 people out there for a month in 2020. 11 people, sorry, altogether, to get these blood samples and stuff for a science project from these birds. And it was the wettest July I've ever known out there. And there's a little river near camp where in 2022, my team were able to hop over the river to get to where we camped. And in 2023, it was so much wider that you had to wade through it. So everything was sodden. The landscape was saturated. Every little path on the hillside was a stream. And basically, after about the first week, we were putting wet socks in wet boots every morning and just going out to do what had to be done and changing back into my damp clothes in the morning from my dry clothes I slept in. Because it was just so incredibly wet, the wettest I've ever seen it out there. It was extraordinary.
And is that because of precipitation, or is that because of melting ice?
No, well, it would have been a combination of both that July, because you do in May, June, you get the melt of the snow and the ice, so the water levels are quite high, the river levels are high. Then it usually dries out pretty quick with heat in June through into July when it can get very warm. But there was a combination of, changing weather patterns and an awful lot of rain in June and July, a lot more than normal on top of the melt. So everything was absolutely sodden. And the new people on the team that year that weren't with us in 2022, I told them, well, they were expecting something similar to what the team had in 2022, but their experience was vastly different. It was a really wet experience. Gosh. So the weather out there is not as reliably hot and sunny as it used to be, say, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. You see, you say hot and sunny and you say Greenland, and I just think you're just having a laugh, aren't you?
I come home with a really good tan usually. I tan easily. And we've got a photograph of three of us who put our arms together at the end of 2022, and you're just comparing the different tones of tan. And people don't believe you've been to Greenland, you come home with the tan, because of all the intense sun, you get the Arctic sun.
Yeah. And you were saying that you've got friends out there. Are they noticing differences in those kind of, you were saying there how the change from one year to another and the differences of the kind of weather. Are the locals there really seeing a difference from decade to decade? The global warming, which is present everywhere. Is it more present there?
It is. I mean, when people say, the Arctic warms faster than anywhere else, if you think about it, near the equator, if things are normally now, say, a degree warmer than they used to be, it's not that huge difference. But if it makes the difference between thawing and freezing, then it has a much bigger impact on your environment. So locals out there are finding sometimes that they're waiting longer for the lakes to freeze so they can take the dogs out on them and that sort of thing. They get more slushy rain this year than this winter than they normally would get. The things aren't freezing and snowing up as reliably as they used to, as early as they used to. So they are seeing real change, which affects because they're eager to get all their winter sports going, their races and dog sledding and the rest of it. So they are seeing change. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Are you seeing, because you said before that you go out there with scientific teams and you go out there, on a wild goose chase. Are you chasing less wild geese? Is there a change in the wildlife numbers and the different species of wildlife that you're recording?
There is something very strange going on there because the original study I was helping out with was studying the Greenland white-fronted goose, which is a small population of a unique sort of race of geese that breeds in summer in Greenland, winters in the UK and Ireland over winter, stages in Iceland on both transitions as well, and that's their entire range. Identified as a separate race by Peter Scott, the son of Robert Falcon Scott, as it were. And there's a friend of mine who's a professional ornithologist that got me interested in going to help him with that work in Greenland, as it were. So that was what the study was about. But over the decades, that species is becoming rarer and rarer in this area, and the Canada goose has been growing in huge numbers out there. So we were going after samples from the Canada geese and hoping to get some Greenland white-fronted geese this time because we were looking for things like avian influenza, because what you have is the Greenland white-fronted geese overwintering in the UK and Ireland, breeding in West Greenland in summer, the Canada geese wintering in North America and breeding in the same area. So they were potentially a transatlantic bridge for disease transmission, And the European AI has turned up in North America now, so it's potential there of study. But we used to catch large numbers of Canada geese because they were breeding like mad out there. But when I went out there in 2022 for this European project, we planned on sampling maybe up to 200 Canada geese. and we got half that amount. And I was surprised at how many fewer birds were around. But the most surprising thing I noticed was very little breeding, because normally the Canada geese are very strong breeders. So there were barely any goslings. And when we went back in 2023, the situation was even worse. Fewer birds, and again, no breeding, no goslings. And I went out on my own again last year to take a look around, and I found fewer birds again. So we don't know what the cause is, but something has caused the Canada geese population to really decline. And they used to be, logarithmically expanding in the area for decades.
Wow. Wow.
But this all enriches my reason for being out there, and what I get out of it. I'm getting my camping in, I'm getting my hiking in, but I'm also gathering information and data that's of interest ecologically, as it were.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. And like you say, if you're out there and you're totally on your own, you get to see a different side of wildlife, don't you? Than if you're either on a tour or you're in a larger group or anything like that. You get to sort of sit still, and wildlife behaves very differently when you're on your own.
You're absolutely right about that. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people who do the trail say they hardly saw any wildlife because the muskox and stuff, generally they stay away from those busy lowland areas, So I'm in the high hills where they are breeding, etc. And I've had so many close encounters with muskox, pleasant ones. Generally, I'm alone. I can approach and get quite close and sit and watch them graze. But you've got to be really careful. Muskox bull defending a family would hit you like a car, as it were. I've only been chased away once by 3 females who didn't like my presence. But I've been really close with muskox, and a real joy.
But back to Greenland. Sorry, couldn't resist.
In my camp, every evening, reliably around about 6 or 7 o'clock, an Arctic fox would come past from the southwest and then go up the hill in front of me, and it was habitually doing this. So every evening, I'd settle down with a coffee and wait for it to turn up, and then a second one started turning up. And I've had lots of really nice encounters with the wildlife out there, which on your own, being unobtrusive, being quiet. You get an enhanced experience.
Yeah, you really do. My solo camps, obviously not to the same extreme at all, but if you just sit and you're just still, and particularly if you're in the same place for a number of days, the wildlife gets used to you quite quickly, and you get a very different experience, and it's great. It's one of the best things of solo camping for me. I love that. You just get to sit and be quiet and just watch and just observe. It's special. It's really special.
Yeah, and I have a favorite spot where I like to camp when I'm solo because it's quite high up. I have a small lake for my water supply, and looking east, you're looking across the land to the edge of the Greenland ice sheet. So it's one hell of a view to see when you open your tent in the morning. Or to sit there in the evening in the sunshine with a coffee and just looking at the ice sheet. I just find it's incredibly enriching just to sit there and just think about where I am in the world, or the joy of being there, away from all the human hubbub, as it were.
Yeah.
But in your group, I realize this isn't for everybody. But if there are people who want to go and do some really wild camping, I'm hoping, that they'd say, yeah, that looks pretty cool. Let's try it.
I think there are definitely people in the group who would love to try that. And we pride ourselves on the fact we've got listeners on every continent apart from Antarctica, and we're still working on that one. But a huge amount of North American listeners. The joy of Greenland is it's accessible, actually. And although it's a really remote place, it's accessible from North America. It's accessible from Europe. So if people do want to go there, they can actually get there reasonably easily.
Yeah, it used to be a guy I had in 2010. I was asked to look after him. He was going to be doing his PhD on the Greenland white-fronted geese in this country. He came from Minnesota, I think it was. He had to fly across the Atlantic to Europe, Amsterdam, I think, and then to Copenhagen to get out to Greenland. And I normally go to Copenhagen to Greenland. But lots has changed. In last November, for political reasons within Greenland, Kongekrabbe, which used to be the main hub airport for the international flight from Copenhagen, and it's at the one end of the trail. The main flights now go to Nuuk, the capital, which is further south, which changes a lot of things for people. But they're also trying to make that, having expanded the airport, opening routes to more parts of the world. They're trying to do that. But fortunately for us hikers, and me having this area where our data is normally gathered on the birds, there's been an agreement to have about 3, I think, direct flights a week in summer from Copenhagen to Kongekrabbe. So So yeah, that should still be viable without having to do more internal flights.
Mm-hmm. No, brilliant.
And in that area, having more people visit, do the locals find that that's a good thing? That sort of
Yeah.
tourism tracker kind of, is it a double-edged sword in regards to more people on the trails and therefore more conservation's needed, but the fact that the money that people coming to see those kind of areas.
There's an interesting point there, about some locals. I think feel that the hikers don't bring much revenue in unless once they stay either end of the trail. A lot of people bring their own food because, well, since I've been going out there initially, it was very unreliable what hikers could get by way of trail food. Even gas or fuel for your stoves was, highly unreliable. You may get lucky, or there might be nothing. Stocks were low. As the popularity of the trail has grown, some of the local shops have started stocking more and more in terms of gas and trail food and whatever. So they can provide more. But I think unless you can be certain of supply, a lot of hikers still bring their own stuff. Some of them will do some of the tourist trips that are out there. So it's not a massive revenue earner, I think, for the locals as yet. But as popularity grows and knowledge about what's available grows, hopefully there'll be more buying locally. I have a friend in Sicily who runs a really good outdoor shop, and I normally order my food from her in advance, except for when I'm taking an expedition out there when I need to, I need food for 25 days for 11 people. That's a hell of a lot of food. About 4,000 pounds worth of food. But on the trail itself, it's a bit of a constant battle with some of the garbage, some of the bad toileting practices, and especially there's a hut called Conglas of Tulle, which if you're going from Conglas to Sisimiut, it's the last hut, and the following hike then is your final day. And unfortunately there, because most people are going that direction, you'll often find bits of clothing or a lot of empty gas canisters, etc., left there at the hut, just to lighten their load, as it were, to go over the pass, which is the biggest hike there, up and down, as it were, to get home. So it is a bit annoying, and we are trying to encourage people to behave, as it were, and really enjoy the trail and keep it pristine. But for me, as I said, I don't really use the trail that much now. I go off my own into complete wilderness, which is immensely satisfying.
And when you're there with groups, I've picked up, I would say that you prefer being there by yourself in the wilderness. How does that? How do you equate that you're there taking people? Does it make that worthwhile so that you know that you enjoy the solitude when you go back?
I like aspects of both of it. And even when I'm with a group, when we go out surveying for the geese before we know where they are to catch them, I tend to go surveying on my own. So that gives me days on my own. I still get a bit of solitude time. The others, new people, I tend to send out in pairs until they're confident because they're unfamiliar with the area. So, and in 2012, I think 2014, one of the years anyway, I went out before the rest of the team, and then I hiked the 100 miles to camp, and then I spent the time with the team. But I've had really good teams the last two, the 2022 and 23, that I selected these people, and we go out there, and it's a tremendously fun thing to do because you're camping in the wilderness for a month. Everybody has a role. We are taking inflatable kayaks and hiking all day and catching wild geese, ringing them, sampling them, whatever. And if you've got the right team of people, there's a great team spirit there, and it's really rewarding to be with a group as well. But find if I'm with a group, I kind of wish I was on my own. If I'm on my own, I sometimes would be nice to have a group there. But generally, you're right. My preference is to be out there on my own.
So, no, go on, Ed. Karen.
I was going to say, when's the next time for you?
Well, I was out there last year, was my 13th visit. This year, because I've got the two pups, I'm not sure whether I'll go out there this summer. I've certainly forgotten all my winter hiking this year because my pups are quite young and I didn't want to leave them. So I really missed my winter trekking this year because I like to go to Svalbard to do some trekking and winter camping out there. Last winter we were out there. The coldest night was -41, I think, in a tent.
Oh my word!
And that's or was it that year or the previous year? No, that was the year I think we slept in that ice cave that night. which was fantastic.
Oh, what a wonderful picture that was. I
That
stared
was-
at that for ages.
Yeah.
That was an amazing experience. We sort of, our guide discovered it because it was almost hidden, but he saw this hole in the snow, if you like, and we found it. And we went in there and decided we'd spend the night in there. And whenever all the stoves were off, when all the snow's been melted and it was silent, you could then hear the river flowing underneath us, under the ice.
Wow. Oh my
And
God.
just to just bivvy, no tent in the ice cave. It was just an amazing camping experience. That one night was really special.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've got to be in that environment in order to find those things, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've got lots of photographs from Svalbard, which is absolutely stunning in winter, really stunning. If you can handle the cold, then it's just fantastic to be out in this pure white landscape. It's so pure and clean and stunning in this white blanket of winter stuff. It's amazing.
Mm.
Just incredible, absolutely incredible. I would love to go out somewhere like that. I'm not sure I could do a month. To be honest, I wouldn't get permission to go for a month, but I would love to go out there for a few days or a week and be in that kind of environment. It's so for our sort of more casual people like me. What sort of equipment is a million miles different from what our average campers might be using? What are you taking? Tell us. We're all about the gear. Let's talk about gear.
We love gear.
Right. Well, I've always used Terra Nova tents out there. That's the brand I use. Apart from the winter trek when I took a Hellsport Himalaya 2 Extreme, which is obviously a winter tent with snow skirt and special ventilation, etc. But normally in summer I use a Terra Nova tent. I take a 2-person geodesic, like the Ultra Quasar or the Superlight Quasar, so to withstand the strong winds if they come in. And because after the 100 miles or so, I then have a static camp for 2 or 3 weeks when I'm looking for the geese. So I like a bit of space in the tent. So 1-person tent is too cramped. So I like to lay my stuff out. And especially if I've got a team, because I'm taking extra equipment for the team, then I need the space. So those are the tents I like to use. I mentioned, you'll take warmer clothing for the evenings because it can get very cold. I normally take my MSR Dragonfly stove is what I like to use. Titanium pots and pans. I think in a sense it's probably normal stuff you would use on something like the West Highland Way or something like that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when you're out there on that kind of hike, you really need to know how to strip your stove down and fix problems and all that sort of stuff. Service my gear before I go, and carry your food. Obviously, I think about my food supply, so I'm not carrying excessive weight. But I do try to make sure I've got all the little gadgets, things that you just might need to repair something. A hole in your tent or a problem with your boot or breaking a pole or whatever. So it's a kind of an upscaling. So I don't know if that's the special stuff I take really for summer. Other than just being sure that I'm confident with all my gear is going to withstand heavy usage, and then I can fix it, repair it, maintain it. In winter, I take 2 stoves. Obviously, I take a spare stove in case one packs in. I think probably the difference I'm guessing is I'm not really that into campsite camping. These giant, massive multi-room tents and whatever, and a comfy chair and stuff. So my gear list would differ in that sense that it's a wild camping gear list.
Yeah.
Everything's got to fit in that backpack. And if I'm walking 100 or so miles, everything's got to fit in that pack, and it's going to get fairly heavy. I normally carry about 36, 37 kilos when I'm starting from the coast, although I've started with 41 or 42 kilos one year when the first time I was going off the main trail. So I was going to new terrain I hadn't been in, and so I took some spare stuff just in case I came camping something I wasn't expecting. But normally I'm carrying about 37 kilos. But some of that is also optics, telescope, binoculars, whatever, to find the birds. So, but otherwise, strip the kit down to what I really need. I have a long list. Obviously, this is probably dull for you to listen to. But I have a long list.
No.
We're all about the gear.
It's interesting that it's all the gear that we would know and expect. We were talking to the guys at Terra Nova at the NEC show a couple of weeks back. love their stuff, and just, knowing that, it's used in that kind of environment. We always knew it would, and they're fantastic things, but they stand up to it. And the Dragonfly, I think that difference of the type of fuel, gas canisters, and where you actually need something that maybe won't freeze up or will be able to use at those lower cold temperatures.
Yeah, I mean, in winter I have the GK Expedition stove, which is very popular with winter trekking, the MSR. The Dragonfly I use in summer. There's probably a bigger difference in terms of winter gear of the stuff that you take. Serious. I'll have my mountain equipment ice line, which is rated to -30 as a sleeping bag, but I put that inside a synthetic bag, so my dew point is shifted outwards, so my down bag stays nice and dry, and all the moisture ends up synthetic bag, etc. So I think there's a lot more to the winter stuff. The summer stuff is just being prepared for the big daily temperature, so you're not freezing in the evening, carrying all your food and your gear, and then just having good, reliable gear, everything that fits in your pack. So you wouldn't take luxuries like a folding chair and whatever else, and that sort of stuff is just way too much stuff to carry.
Yeah. So, and how did you know about doing that with your sleeping bag? Is that just is that talking to others, advice from other people, or studied up on what to do in those situations? Because that seems like such a very sensible thing to do.
Yeah, it's all of those really. In a sense, it's talking to others, it's reading what other people are doing, what their gear lists are, and some advice from people I buy my gear from that I trust. But I have found on the winter trekking, not everybody, there's not one single philosophy that everybody regards. That everybody has slightly different views about things and does things differently. So in a sense, you can go with that advice, but you've got to find what works for you. In the end, what works, and I know what works for me now, as it were. So I do it my way, and if somebody else thinks that's wrong, well, if it works for me, it works for me. So fine. I've not had injuries and whatever, and not had mishaps, so I guess I'm fine. The one thing I forgot to mention, obviously, going out there in summer, is that apart from having my GPS, my Garmin InReach subscription, etc., I also carry an Iridium satellite phone just as a backup. So if one device would fail and I did have an emergency, I've got another means of contacting the outside world. So.
It's having contingencies, isn't it? It's contingencies on contingencies. I was going to ask you if you carried a sat phone, but
I do. Where I go off on my own, I know if I fall and break my ankle, nobody's going to come across me. On the trail, you probably go no more than 2 or 3 days now, probably in summer, without somebody coming along. But where I'm way off the trail, nobody's going to come across me there. So I have to have that redundancy.
Yeah. Gosh. Proper wild places. I suppose a final question might be: have you had any epic fails? Have you got it wrong and things have really gone south and it's been squeaky bum time, I suppose?
I thought you're going to ask me that, weren't you? There's been so many. I absolutely love it out there. I suppose I can only think of 2, and maybe neither of them is really a big deal in a sense. I did have one time, I think it was 2017, I'd fully serviced my stove at home and everything was fine. And the very first night out there, for some reason, it wouldn't work. I couldn't get my stove going. And I discovered that the little rubber cup in the pump in the MSR had come off at the end, and it was in the bottom of the shaft. So I wanted to try and pull it out without scraping the inside of the plastic shaft, which would break the seal, obviously. So it took me about half an hour to work this little bloody rubber cup up the shaft and get it out of there. And eventually I got my stove going, but that's just a small mishap. I've had no real big disasters out there, I would say. The biggest problem, I suppose, just comes to mind is last year, the boots I took last year, they had such a drenching the year before out with that team, complete drenching, that I didn't notice that it had started to corrode some of the glue of the sole. And so last year when I was out on my own, the sole of one of my boots began to peel off, which was really annoying. So I managed to put a strap around it to hold it in place, which kept slipping, but it limped me back into town, as it were. So that's the biggest mishap I've had, I guess.
Yeah. It's. I thought you were going to say they'd shrunk by half the size, which I've made that mistake myself. Listeners will know I've made that mistake myself.
No, I think I just hadn't realised they'd been so wet so much that it actually corroded some of the glue.
God,
it's the one thing I've never checked. I suppose is the sole of my boot still attached. It's
It's not something that it's going to be top on your checklist. But I suppose it comes down to just being properly prepared, isn't it, for something like this? This is a very serious place that you're going into, and you need to make sure that you've checked everything and checked it again, and you know your kit inside out.
Yeah, my planning normally starts, a couple of months before, and I usually go through my checklist several times before I finally pack my pack. When I'm taking teams out there for the science stuff, my planning would start around about October and assembling a team for July. And it's amazing how much time you need to sort out all the food rations, all the different food tolerances, get the Greenland government licenses and everything else, and the logistics. So planning for the expeditions takes a lot longer, but for solo, a couple of months usually is enough for me to get all my gear together and ready.
Amazing. Well, if ever you want to take two complete hapless casual campers, we would insist that you carry the folding chairs.
I've been asked whether I would guide out there, people, and I've always had this conflict. I would like to guide the right kind of people so they could experience this wilderness and get off the trail and really see the big wildlife, etc. And on the other hand, it's such a personally, immensely, deeply fulfilling experience for me that I kind of want to be out there on my own.
And
I'm conflicted. It'd be really nice to share it with other people and see what I see and experience what I experience out there. And on the other hand, if I did, I'd think, I wish I was here on my own. It's a real conflict.
I can bet.
Oh, gosh.
We will put links of the Facebook groups and the trails so that people know it. But Huw, it's been an absolute pleasure to share some of your experiences with our listeners. Thanks so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, guys. Nice talking to you.
Yeah, really, really nice talking to you. Thank you so much. It's I might ask you if we can steal some of your photographs to put on our socials for the rest of the week, so people can see some of your incredible adventures across the rest of our socials. If
there's lots more I'd like to share on your page if you guys just to inspire others. Say that there's this great stuff out there if you want to go there. So.
Please do. This episode will go live on. We're recording this on Sunday evening. It'll go live next Friday morning. Gets released at 4 a.m. GMT. So please, post away on the group as much as you like. It's people will find it really interesting. It's fascinating stuff. But thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Thanks. Enjoyed it very much, guys. Cheers.
Welcome to the Casual Camping Minute Mindfulness. Let the sounds of nature take you back to the camping field.
That was a really nice minute mindfulness to follow on from what was an incredible guy. How nice was Huw?
Yeah, really, really nice. And I guess from a very casual camping person like myself, that tends to need a lot of people around me when I go camping.
You are a social animal.
I am a social animal. And I was thinking, how many beers can you take along if you've got like? I daren't ask, Tim. I daren't ask.
No, I'm guessing there was no beers.
You don't mess around with beers. You take a hip flask. No, I think from a casual camping point of view, just what it just fills me with awe that there's people that you can get on a plane and you can go via Amsterdam, sorry, via the Netherlands, up to Norway, is it, and then across to Greenland. Didn't even know that. I think it's just it just blows my mind of what is able to do that. And I would know myself that I don't think I could carry a 35 kilo pack.
No.
I could probably do it for a day, but a multi-day hike, you've got to build up to that. And that's what Huw was saying just after we finished recording there. That's the thing that people go, I want to do that. I would want to experience that, but I know that there's quite a lot of things that I would need to do before getting to that.
Yeah. We had a nice little chat after stopping the interview, and he was saying that, wasn't it? There's obviously, it's as any trail, whether it's in Greenland, it's in North America, it's in Scotland. As any trail becomes more popular, there's kind of a have a go culture of people that will just have a go, and you kind of got to remember that this trail, and anywhere in Greenland, is so remote that you really need to know what you're doing before you step foot on it. And you really need to. There's a lot of steps that you should have gone through long before you consider even trying it. But it is, that said, it's accessible. Which
I think that's the difference, isn't it? It's accessible. Are you prepared enough for it?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And I as I said to him just before we finished, where do you get that knowledge? And it is just that thing of reading things, speaking to others, kit lists and stuff like that. But
getting out there on shorter trails and try, using that equipment, getting to know it. He talked about stripping down his stove and being able to fix it.
Yeah.
You've really got to know your equipment inside out, backwards, upside down, back to front, because, there isn't anyone that you can call that's going to fix that for you. It's, you've got to be able to sort the problems and work the problems out there in the field. And, you can only do that really by being experienced. It's, just incredible. I would love to do it, but as you say, there's a lot of steps that I would have to go through before I could even consider it. It's but awesome, absolutely awesome.
And whether or not you're going to Greenland or whether you're going to that campsite that you like to go to, I think it is, about getting out there. It is about experiencing nature, however you do it, whether that's in isolation, whether that's in good groups. Don't spoil it for other people. Leave no trace, and get out there. That's the bit. We're going camping this coming week. I can't wait. I know that there's a lot of chat on the socials about who's out this weekend, who's doing what, and sun is out, spring is sprung in the Northern Hemisphere. 2 weeks on the trot, Tim. I'm learning.
Look at that.
But it is about getting out there, and I think really inspiring to listen to you, definitely.
And that's the thing, that's not everyone's going to go camping Greenland and go hike, but actually, if it inspires you to go out in your local field, even if it just inspires you to go for a good old hike and just sit there peacefully in nature and just observe, then that's all right. That's enough. I love to go camping on my own. I don't do disappearing from into the wilderness camping, but I love to go camping on my own. And you do get a different experience. If you're in the same place for a few days and you're just still and you're quiet and you're calm, you get that different relationship with nature. The birds come an awful lot closer. You see more rabbits. You'll see foxes. You'll see badgers. You'll see all sorts of things if you just sit long enough and are patient and be an observer rather than someone who's just moving through or a consumer. It's and certainly Huw's inspired me to get out there and do some solo camps again, which we're not doing next week, but the year is just starting, people. So there's so much I want to do this year. But yeah.
Well, another great episode, even if I do say so myself. So I've been Ade.
And I've been Tim.
Casual Camping Podcast accepts no liability and does not officially recommend any products or endorse any techniques discussed in an individual podcast episode or shown on Casual Camping Podcast social media accounts. Individuals should make their own informed decision and risk assessment of any products or advice prior to any purchase or use.